Hassan with her Private Eye X-Files.
So you're the finder of lost children.
Private Eye X-Files, every Wednesday from 10 to midnight Eastern, Studio B, on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
I realize it's very hard for you to take in, but it's your destiny to find the golden child.
Guess what, man? You got the Nighthawk here, man, and I'm telling you news, information, and entertainment. And everything that is so awesome about Revolution Radio is right here for the taking. But, you know, Revolution Radio's hosts keep it hopping and rocking year-round, 24/7. And I bet you have a favorite host, or maybe you got many favorite hosts, right? And I'm also betting you didn't catch every show. So now you can order the Season 2013 podcast disc. It's all of your favorite host shows of each show, depending on who the host is, from 2013. For now, $30 per host, which means that you get the podcast of every broadcast in 2013 that your favorite host did, starting in February, actually, this year. And not only do you help fund the station by picking these up, but you help fund your favorite host's work, because I split the proceeds of the sale with the host, less the shipping, of course. So this is just $30, and you get a data DVD that has every podcast for the entire year. Whose podcast are you earning? Well, all you have to do is visit freedomslips.com/season 2013.htm. There's a little box. You type in your favorite host name and click pay. And when you're done, you will receive your podcast disc in 7 to 21 days, depending on the demand. Hey, man, I'm just one guy, right? Anyway, and as an added bonus, man, if you order more than 5 hosts season DVDs, I'm going to give you a free 1-year access to our daily archives. So, man, don't miss out. It's all here. It's all here. You can help us. You can help the station, help fund the station, and the host get half of it, which means you get to help fund your favorite host. I mean, how could it be better? There is no other station out here that does that. So thank you very much. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, man. You're listening to the Nighthawk, and I'm telling you what, man, this is where information never, ever sleeps, including me. Revolution Radio.
Join Revolution Radio every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio B for Momentary Zen with host Zen Garcia at freedomslips.com, the People Station.
He wants a challenge. Let's give him one.
The voice that whispers in your ears are the screams that you fear. The mind you cannot defy is the heart that rules mankind. The people who made you are the gods that will save you. I am Steve Travesty. I am the voice. The ghost in the machine. Ghost in the Machine. Tuesdays, 8 p.m. Studio A.
Right here, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps. Revolution Radio. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello, everybody. This is your host, Royce Redneck Radio Man, returning to you now. And while we were on break, I attempted to reach Greg, and I didn't get an answer a couple of times. I'm sure.
Here.
I was just fixing to ask if you were here because your picture popped back up, but I wasn't sure. Did you get disconnected for a second?
No, I just logged in. I don't know what happened, but anyway, I'm here.
Well, okay, that's the good news. I was telling everybody earlier that you would be telling us about your book, The God Secret. Now, if I remember correctly from the last time we talked, you said you could see God's story of creation and other things from the Bible in the stars.
Yes, you can. Yeah. You see, what you've got to understand is that 3,000 years ago, which is when all this happened, the people at that time, they hadn't electricity, and therefore the stars looked much brighter to them than they do to us today. And the priests and priest astronomers told stories about the stars, which we call the heavens and they call the heavens. And they made stories up about pictures which they created by joining the stars up like you join dots. So all the stories, all the myths, all the stories that are in the Bible and in the Old Testament are all stories which came from ancient myths created by these priest astronomers. So, for example, the Adam and Eve story, you can see it quite clearly. You can see the picture of Eve. You can see the picture of Adam, and she is in the place where Adam's ribs are. You can see Eve eating the apple. You can see Satan whispering in her ear. All of those things are visible if you just join up the appropriate dots in the right place in the sky.
So in order to find this here, didn't you have to spend several years playing Connect the Stars on the sky?
Sure. It took me 7 years to do it. Interestingly, once I understood the pattern, I understood what was happening, it became easier because all these things are in exactly the same place. What isn't obvious to people is that the pole position in the sky moves. And the Earth wobbles, in effect, and that what we see as the pole position, which is now near the star Polaris, moves in the sky. It takes 25,920 years to rotate this circle. But during this period, during the period that we're interested in, then the pole position was in the constellation of Ursa Major, what you call the Big Dipper or the Plough. And at that time, the Big Dipper circulated immediately around the pole position in the sky, around what we call the North Pole. And all of these pictures and stories occurred in that place, in and around the constellation of Ursa Major, the Big Dipper.
Now,
so it was. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just going to ask you if Ursa Major wasn't that close to the Pleiades somewhere?
No, not really. No, it isn't. But it's in the North Sky. You know where the Big Dipper is. Yeah, you've got this picture that looks like a kind of ladle or a cup.
Actually, I never look at the night sky. I'm in Houston, and it's pretty foggy here.
All right. Well, not many people do look at the night sky, and so therefore, the whole thing about the stars seems a bit strange to us. But in ancient times, of course, that was the movies, that was the cinema, that was the place where everything took place, and it was the place where God lived, and And all the gods, of course, there were many aspects of God in those days. There wasn't just one.
Yeah, and actually there was many different gods in those days too.
Well, there were, but there were many aspects of God. You know, if you're a Christian, you perhaps call the Virgin Mary all sorts of different names, like the Mother of God and the Blessed Virgin and all sorts of things. Well, it was the same in those days, that actually there were many gods, many God names that were the same God, but called all sorts of different names to represent the same God.
Kind of like, for example, the Babylonian Tammuz would have been the equal of the Egyptian Horus, and so on and so on.
Exactly.
They were only the names changed to hide the gods, I guess.
Sure, absolutely.
But yeah, different countries, different languages. I can see how it could, same story apply to different, names. In other words.
Sure, exactly that.
So that would mean, actually, though, that would explain why all the creation stories, all the flood myths and Tower of Babel stories are also, they match from culture to culture, even from as far away as the Middle East to America. They all have similar stories about the very beginning. I'm assuming this is why.
They do, of course, and they have similar stories because they all looked up at the same group of stars, and they all made up the same story. They all originated in the stars. And, of course, the wise men, the priest astronomers, moved around. The Druids that came from Northern Europe many years ago, 5,000 years ago, moved down through Mesopotamia and eventually into Egypt. And they were the people that carried the original stories.
What was the purpose of the stories? I mean, what did they intentionally do? Was the original intent to do with them?
Well, we don't know, do we, Royce? I mean, we weren't there, so we can only guess. It's the best we can do is guess. But what you can say is, looking at history, is that the priest astronomers were the advisors to the pharaohs, if we're talking about Egypt, for example, and that the pronouncements and the things that they said were the basis of the controls that the pharaonic regimes had over the people. I mean, the pharaohs and the priest astronomers announced the idea of the equivalent of hell and eternal damnation if people didn't do what they were told. So, they didn't. It was a way of controlling people,
So they see this big tapestry in the sky. It tells a story. It has a moral to it. And they're like, well, we can tell this here story and tell people they shouldn't sin, and we can control them.
Sure. Well, I think so. But I'm guessing, like we'd all be guessing.
I understand.
What I can tell you is they may have believed it. I mean, what is incredible was, we're talking about 5,000 years ago. They hadn't got the benefit of science that we have today. And they may well have believed all this stuff. And they may have proclaimed it to the citizens and the ordinary people, believing that it was true. And so well did they do that, of course, the myths carried it into reality. So thereafter, people believed that there was such a thing as God, and that there was such a thing as Adam and Eve, and it's carried down to today. And there are people who today fervently believe that this was true because they were told it was true by their mother and father and their priests and so on,
So you say that they believed that it was true that there was a God. Is there an indication that perhaps you don't believe there is a God?
Well, all I can tell you is that the stories, as they were told, in many cases, are not true. That they were fabrications. They were stories that were created based on joining up dots in the sky. I mean, in this particular part of the heavens, you can see, if you look carefully enough, the name of God in Hebrew, in Egyptian, and in Greek.
Oh, wow.
It's there. They're there to be seen, and of course, it's actually said, isn't it, in the book of Revelation, that you can see the name of God in Hebrew, Greek, and Egyptian in that part of the sky, Apollonius and the name of God in Hebrew, and so on. It's actually said that that's the case. Well, of course, it is the case. You can see it. Now, it's no wonder that the Hebrews called themselves the chosen people when they saw the name of God in Hebrew written in this part of the sky. It's had massive significance for them, not surprisingly.
Oh, that is really something else. I was talking to a guy in a group the other day, and he had a thing that told this whole big story that you're talking about. And according to him, the whole story of Jesus is really written in the stars as well. And one of the big names he mentioned was Apollonius, because we know in Revelation there's an Apollyon mentioned having the keys to the abyss, I believe it is.
Well, yeah, but then what's the abyss? We don't know what it is. All we can say is that the sun came up and the stars set in the sky and the earth revolved and this particular section of stars which is actually, if you read the Egyptian Book of the Dead, it tells you where God is, and God is in this particular area of the stars. So it's not a hidden thing. And of course, if the stars set, if they go below the horizon, perhaps that's going into the abyss. We don't know what they meant, frankly.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Was what it meant was the keys to the morning or to the dawning of the day.
Sure, exactly that. And of course, if you think about these stars rotating about the pole position, at one part of the rotation, they're up and they're there and they are in one format. And as they rotate so that they go below the pole position, that's in another position. Now, what I can tell you is that the way the stars are formulated, in one position, they create the picture of the God shape, and then 24 hours later, in exactly the opposite position, they create the position of the Satan shape. So it's quite easy to see that God is that Satan is God upside down. Amazing, isn't it? Are you there?
That kind of goes hand in hand with as above, so below.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. And that's probably the message they were trying to send, is that good and evil are just separate halves of the same coin.
Oh, they're the same coin the other way around, upside down.
Right, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Kind of like a quarter has a heads and a tail.
Sure.
It's the same basic thing. Of course, you got that middle ground as well. That's where the two coins join, or the two halves of the coins join, should I say? Which is an interesting concept. It bespeaks of more of a triunity than a dualistic belief, if you ask me.
Well, I've pondered about this whole thing about the Trinity thing. And in fact, there was a program on the radio here in the UK today, and they were talking about the Trinity. And in my view, the whole essence of what was believed to be God was complex. The reason is because you can imagine, can't you, that this pole position in the sky, which was known to rotate around the sky, and it was known to take 25,920 years to do it, because there were ancient texts that claimed that this was the case. In other words, these people were advanced mathematicians. They knew how to calculate it. Now, it's not difficult to imagine that the center of this circle of the pole positions might have been considered to be, the greatest of all the gods, if you like. And then the pole position itself might have been considered to be a god position. And then it's not difficult to imagine, is it, that those things that circulated around this god position in the immediate vicinity were also part of this whole God thing. So I can quite see how there can be a three-dimensional aspect to this whole God thing as it was pictured in those days. Of course, I'm guessing. I don't know. I wasn't there, and there's nothing that's been written about any of this. You know, people today, the people in the universities who study these things don't go back and analyze it the way that like this. They analyze it from the texts that were written and from, you know, theological concepts and so on. They don't go back to the essence of it all, which was just simple patterns in the sky.
I can see. Now, I want to mention to everybody, if you want to learn more about Greg and his book, go to www.thegodsecret.com. And I pasted, I'm sorry, .net. Thanks for correcting me on that.
All right, okay.
And I pasted that link into the chat room for y'all to have easy convenience to click on it and go to a site. Now, while you were talking and I was listening, I went to your site, and I see a tab that says, "Have we been deliberately misled?" I thought I'd ask you that question since you got it up on your website. Okay. Have we been deliberately misled?
Well, my view is we have. What you've got to read the book to get the whole story. But the ancient Celts duplicated the pattern of the northern stars on the ground. In other words, they created monuments in the form of temples and round circles and so on, which were an exact copy of the stars in the northern sky. And the principal places, the principal monuments in Europe, over a very, very wide period, the principal places in Europe duplicated the exact positions of this particular group of stars, Ursa Major, that we're talking about. So the constellation of Ursa Major is identically copied on the ground. And all the supporting stars within the constellation are also duplicated. Now, what is amazing about that is once you see it on the ground, what you can see is that the cup of the constellation contains two interior angles of 108 degrees, which are the interior angles of a regular pentagram. Now, this, you know, the pentagram is the five-sided shape or the five star, which is all associated with strange things like, you know, Satan and the tarot and all of these things. But in reality, is the central shape, which is to do with God. Now, these positions on the ground, all the abbeys were built in Europe on the site of ancient Celtic religious sites. And so if you go to the positions of the abbeys that were created in the 10th, 11th and 12th centuries in Europe, then you get this same pattern because they're all on ancient Celtic religious sites. Now, what is significant is that when the Cistercian order was created, which was at the same time as the Knights Templar were created, and were all associated with the Knights Templar, 3 of the founding abbeys of the Cistercians were on very critical positions in relation to this pattern on the ground. But these 3 abbeys, having been built and created, and I don't know if you can imagine in the 10th and 11th centuries how much effort and time and resources that were needed to build an abbey. It wasn't just a simple thing like putting up a building like it is today. It was all done by stonemasons and ponies and carts.
They were big, grand edifices.
Exactly. But these 3 abbeys, Clairvaux, which was the abbey that was founded by Bernard de Clairvaux, Saint Bernard, Citeaux, which is the founding abbey of Robert, the actual founder of the Cistercian order. These abbeys, within 5 years of them being created, were demolished and moved by a distance of, in one instance, 500 yards, and in others, and another 5 leagues. Which is, you know, I don't know, 1.5 miles. They were moved. Now, why on earth would that happen? What I can tell you is that the new positions created such accurate alignments to this pattern on the ground, to this position of Ursa Major on the ground, that it's frightening. They were accurate to the foot. You know, over a period of 200 miles, you could now create alignments which are massively accurate. Frankly, I don't believe that's a coincidence. I believe that whoever was involved in the building and creation and positioning of those abbeys knew exactly this position on the ground. And if they knew the position on the ground, they knew the pattern. And if they knew the pattern, they must have known what it was about.
Exactly. They had to know what the message in the stars was,
Exactly.
and they wanted to make sure the story was told correctly.
Exactly.
So that kind of catches them in the act, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. It does. It's just incredible, really. Yeah.
And and I think it was commonplace in Europe during medieval times for the Roman Catholic Church to build all their new churches over where the old, not just Druid, but Gnostic and Catholic churches as well, didn't they?
They all did, yeah. In fact, the Romans did the same. When the Romans conquered Celtic lands, the instruction from Rome was that they had to build Roman temples on ancient Celtic, ancient Druid religious sites. That's what they did. So in some instances, the cathedrals that were built in the 10th and 11th centuries were built on the sites of Roman temples, which were in turn the sites of ancient Celtic religious sites. So, it's a tradition, that has gone on for a long time.
Could that be because these locations are considered holy sites, or
exactly that?
Are they maybe set on ley lines?
Well, we don't know that. All we know is that they were considered to be religious sites. They may well have been on ley lines, and in some instances we know that they are, but we don't know what people knew in those days.
Yeah, because I read a book by Zechariah Sitchin. Well, I read all of his books actually, and I know a lot of people say that he was a fraud, but whether he was or not, one of the things he said that made a lot of sense was that before they could build a temple back in those days, or back in the, early Israelite days, for example, they had to actually get instructions from the God about where to put it, which way to face it, the size of it, all the specs on it, in other words.
Right. Now, of course.
If these ancient people didn't know about ley lines, if these gods were extraterrestrials, maybe they did.
Well, what we do know is that the priests from way back were all priest astronomers. And of course, if you know anything about astronomy at all, it's not difficult to plot positions on the ground by tracking the way the stars go. Now, they may be able to track the ley lines, energy lines on the ground. There may well have been extraterrestrials. I have no idea, frankly, but I do know that it is possible to plot positions on the ground. If you know what is happening with the stars, you can track them.
Well, one thing that does seem obvious to me is if they were particular and they had to put their temples on sacred ground, then something had to make the ground sacred. It had to stand out from all the rest of the ground around the planet to be considered sacred, in other words.
Well, that sounds reasonable. I don't know.
So we'd have to ask ourselves, if it's not because it's ley lines, what would be some of the other reasons that the ground would be considered holy or sacred? Is this where they expected to get more spiritual power or be able to perform more miracles or something? You have to wonder, don't you?
I don't know. You may well be right. All I know is that the pattern is massively accurate. If you take Stonehenge is on the site which is one of the key positions of the stars of Ursa Major as they've been duplicated on the ground. Absolutely one of the keys. The ancient meridian through Paris goes directly through the center of the base of the constellation. And when I say directly through the center, I mean to the foot. It's absolutely precise.
Now, you're talking about the one that's known as the Rose Line.
Well, it's been called lots of things, but the ancient meridian goes through Paris. And look, think about the word Paris. Paris means par, which is equal in Latin, and is, which means equal in ancient Greek. So Paris means equal. It's the line of the meridian, what was thought to be the center of all things. Going through where? Through the center of the God constellation.
Okay. Well, I was just thinking, doesn't that same meridian go right through the Louvre?
Through the Louvre.
I might be pronouncing it
I'm
wrong.
not sure about that. No, that's okay. But I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
But the meridian position in Paris certainly is where the what do you call it? What's the place that tracks the stars and planets? I've forgotten now. Anyway, I've forgotten that. I'll think of it. But there's the name of a place. The Observatoire. The Observatoire in Paris is the key position, and there are certain stones and monuments right down through Paris which plot this line of the ancient meridian.
And if you follow that meridian around the world, does it intersect any other key points that you're aware of?
I don't know the answer to that. It's not something I've done, so I can't tell you.
That would be interesting to find out.
Sure.
Might tell a story all its own.
Yeah.
But yeah, this stuff, I know that I've read enough about it online and in different books to know that they were very exact about it. There were certain things that ancient man found very important. Their holy scriptures, they had to be exact down to a jot or a tittle.
Oh, no, they did. Yeah.
They spilled coffee on it. They wanted to put a fresh page there.
Yeah.
Very particular. They were very particular about where their holy sites went. They were very particular about holy days and feast days and things of this nature.
Yeah.
Anytime you give things this kind of importance, you got to have a reason.
Well, you do, but then, we can only surmise as to what it might be. All I can tell you is that my researches show that they thought that the position of God during the time when what we know as religion was created was in this particular constellation. It was in the constellation of Ursa Major. Now, of course, man had existed for a long time prior to that, and there is written evidence that priest astronomers tracked the position of the pole for many years prior to this particular period in history when what we know as religion was created. So, what was their thinking, and why did they do it, and why did they do it? Well, I can only assume that they thought that the position in the northern sky, where they believed that the Earth was rotating around the pole position, they thought that that was the place where God was. That's all I can tell you.
That very well could be. Of course, is there you're talking about, again, in Ursa Major, is that right?
Well, it was in Ursa Major during the time that what we know as religion was created. It was not in Ursa Major for 25,000 years prior to that. So this pole position, it takes 25,000 years to move around the sky. But during this period, during the period when civilization existed or was beginning in Egypt, and most of what we know as religion started in Egypt. Be under no illusion about that.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, wasn't it the Egyptians that brought us the Great Year?
It was. There is, yeah.
And that also is around 25 to 26,000 years.
Well, that is the Great Year. That's the year, the time that it takes for this pole position to rotate round a complete cycle.
So, at the time that the pole finishes the cycle, then that's when the stars should be back to the way they were when religion was first thought of.
Well, exactly.
Or at the end or the beginning of a great year.
Exactly. Well, who knows where the beginning and the end of it is? They defined the beginning and end of it, and they claimed, you read the Book of the Dead, and it'll tell you quite clearly that God and the gods were behind the constellation of Ursa Major. That's what they say.
I never had a chance to read the Book of the Dead, although I think if I remember correctly, I got my son one for his birthday this last year, or Christmas this last
Right.
Christmas. I don't even know if he's read it yet, but I know I haven't read it
Right.
yet.
Right.
But I
right.
really should read it. Aren't they also known as the pyramid texts?
They are. Yeah, the same. It's the same texts. Yeah, exactly the same. What you can see the pattern, on the palace or the temple of Dendera. Dendera is one of the temples of Egypt. In the temple of Dendera, the roof of the temple is all the constellations, and they're patterned out and coloured on the roof of this temple. But the central constellation, right at the centre of this entire pattern of the heavens and all its constellations, right at the centre of it, is the constellation of Ursa Major, which they didn't call it that, but it's there right at the centre of this whole series of patterns.
Okay. Now, again, we wouldn't be able to see it right now. And when we do see it, there might be more stars. I mean, we can see Ursa Major, but it won't look the same as it did back then. It'll be missing some stars.
Well, it won't be missing any stars, but it'll be less bright. One of the problems for us is that there is so much light being generated on the Earth that it reflects back off the atmosphere, and therefore we can't see the sky as clearly as they did then. That we're obscuring things from ourselves by all the light that we create on the Earth.
Okay. Now, what are some of the other stories that you've been able to put together out of that, the stars, in other words?
Okay. Well, one of the interesting things is that the Book of Revelation has all the clues to this. If you read the Book of Revelation, and when you start to understand how this was all created, then many things in the Book of Revelation are telling you about all these positions in the stars. And what is really interesting is that the tarot, which is claimed to have been originated in Egypt, has got all the stories in it from the Book of Revelation. So what you can see is that there's a tie-up between the Book of Revelation, the tarot, and what have become known as the Grail stories or the Grail mysteries. All these things are talking about exactly the same thing. They're trying to unravel these stories that were created in ancient times. And they're all talking about exactly the same thing. So if you go to Revelation and you read stories about the lamb and the eagle and the sword and the cup, all of these things are all there to be seen in this place in the stars where God was.
It's almost like they're using this astrology and these star placements to sort of tell the story of one great year to the next great year in a prophecy format. It sounds
exactly that. No, that's very astute. Yeah, that's right.
Well, and you have to ask yourself, how accurate can you be? Because they're talking about telling a 25,000-year-old story.
They are, which is quite interesting because they talk about this. There's one little phrase in the Book of Revelation. In ancient Greek, every letter had a numerical value, and every word had a numerical value because it was the sum of the letters in the word. And what I did was I went to the Book of Revelation and I put all these numerical values on everything. And there's only one phrase in the Book of Revelation where, when you put all these numbers on, adds up to the value of 25,920. And this particular phrase talks about a circle and talks about four things at the four corners of the circle. And these four things are the shape of the constellation at each of the four stages, or the four quarters, if you like, of the cycle of this 25,920 years. So it really is a whole message to do with what was happening in the sky And as I say, maybe people in those ancient times who didn't know science like we know it today really did believe that this was where God was, and this is what the shape of God was at each of these 4 stages of the 25,920-year cycle. I don't know.
Well, they seem to know exactly what the future held, no matter what.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I mean, let's face it. Some of the things that was in Revelation that you speak of being in the stars was put down in Revelation in paper format. Looks like it's already come to pass.
Well, because the thing keeps going round, doesn't it? You know, it's a cycle, as you said. 25,120, 26,000 years, the whole cycle repeats itself. So yeah, it's a history story, but it's a prediction of the next cycle at the same time.
So these great year periods might also be known as an aeon that you hear them talk about. Might be pronounced eon.
Could be, yeah.
And because I've heard tell, and I've read in some of these online articles about ancient times, that they used to consider time, especially the Mayans, by the eons or by the aeons. The big great year periods, in other words. They had like separate cycles. They had that, and then they had the cycle from, Pisces to Aquarius. Then you had the other smaller cycles after that, in other words.
Right.
So I'm pretty sure they got all of that from the stars then.
Sure.
And then the stars also determine how long a year is, how long a day is, how many hours in a day.
Right.
Astronomically and astrologically, they knew a lot more than we know today.
Well, they did. They might not have put the same, it's in the same context, but they did. They knew very accurately the timings of this whole cycle of events. There's no doubt about that. I mean, we do know it accurately today, but we don't make much of it because we just think it's the poles circulating around, and the ordinary man in the street isn't that bothered about it, is he? I mean, and so they're not even bothered about religion. Those people who are bothered about religion actually think that religion is true. They don't think it's stories that came out of the stars in the sky, which is where it did come from, of course.
Okay. Now, I show we're running low on time, and I wanted to give you a chance to tell everybody about some of your other books.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I wrote a first book. Called On Earth as It Is in Heaven, which was a book about that I spent time. I was provoked to by a friend of mine, and I tracked every single ancient Celtic site in Europe. I tracked all the abbeys, and I tracked all the cathedrals, and it was doing that, out of doing that all this came. But I put all of that into a book, which was called On Earth as It Is in Heaven. And that on its own took a long, long time. And in that book, I also give a chronology of what the Templars did year by year and what they were about, because, of course, there's a lot of mysteries surrounding the Templars and the Cistercians and what they did and so on. And so I went to a lot of trouble to show that these people knew about this pattern and knew what it meant, and that the timings of what they did were a very clear indication that at this time of history, that these secrets were kept secret and were known to a selective group of people. And then the second book, which you've already mentioned, The God Secret, which you can get by going to Amazon.com. You can buy The God Secret by going to Amazon. But I then asked myself, having written the first book, well, why did this happen? Why was this pattern put on the ground? And so my second book was an attempt to answer that question. Why on earth had this happened? Why had people gone to all this trouble and put this pattern on the ground? It must have meant something. It could only have been done because out of revelation on the one hand, or they were trying to give us a message on the other hand, and I didn't know which, so I attempted to address that. But then when I have the odd moment, I write short stories, And so I have a little book of short stories which can be got from Amazon called A Point of View. And they're just stories which attempts to put people into a different place and see things from a different perspective. They're a bit weird, I suppose, if you're not into that kind of thing. But I look at things like time and death and, why we do the things we do and what makes us do the things we do and why do we do things. And I'm just about to launch a second volume, which will also be on, you'll be able to get from Amazon. I'll put it on Kindle, and that'll be volume 2 of A Point of View. And I look at things like, immigration, how can we solve that problem, and drugs, and how do we solve that problem? What is that all about? Why do we take drugs? And death, and what is death? And, what is time travel, and how do we do that? And how could we travel between the stars? So I do little stories which sort of open our minds up as to how all these things might be possible. Is that what you wanted me to say, Royce?
Well, I don't know about wanted you to say, but
it's what it is.
But yeah, I mean, I think you write some good books. I think you're a great guest, and I think a lot of people would probably benefit from checking out your material. I know that I read your book, A Point of View, and it wasn't your usual kind of reading, but it was very thought-provoking.
Right. Right.
In fact, you and me did a show on it one day. If you remember,
we did. Yeah.
And
just in the volume 2, which you've not read yet, but it'll be up shortly. I just do a little story about to show people that things might be possible. There's one of the ways in which all becomes possible is through our imagination. If you want to imagine yourself sitting on the moon, for example, just go and sit up there on the moon. Well, how long does it take to get there? It takes a click of a finger, and you can sit on the moon in the click of a finger in your imagination. Now, the imagination is the other dimension. We've got the dimension, the height, width, breadth, time, we say is a dimension. But imagination is the clue to the dimension which we can all tap into. You can go anywhere you like and do anything you like in the click of a finger using your imagination. Now, once the mathematics of how imagination works in the human brain, once the mathematics of that is plotted, then I've got to tell you, the whole of the universe is open to mankind.
I would think that it'd be open without the mathematics already, wouldn't it?
Well, it is. But then, that's just going there in your imagination. Once you've got the mathematics, you can actually physically go there.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Oh, sure. Of course you will. I mean, you just got to, all we need is the mathematics of how imagination works. That's all we need.
I don't think anybody's ever studied that one yet, but I'm pretty sure it'd make a pretty fascinating study. A lot of people think that the imagination is just a dreamland. In other words, it has no value and no importance. But in all honesty, if you can actually sit there, close your eyes, and intentionally visualize yourself on the moon, which many can, then I think it has more merit than just some, dreamland thing that's not value at all, in other words.
Of course. And that's the real hub of the secret. The secret is to understand that imagination is the key to all things.
And from what science has been telling us lately, quantum mechanics says, we may be somebody's imagination living in dreamland now.
Yeah. That's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, it's an interesting concept. Yeah.
Thank God it's a concept, because I don't think I'd want to just be somebody's dream.
Well, it doesn't matter. Who was it? The blue. One of the groups, I can't remember, Blue something or other, and the lead singer sang a song where he said, "I think and therefore I am." Didn't he say that? What was that song?
I thought that was said on Sherlock Holmes by Moriarty.
Well, I think a lot of people have probably said it. I don't know who originated that thought, but that's the concept, isn't it? I think and therefore I am.
Well, they do. The quantum mechanics has said before a wave can turn into a particle, it has to be observed.
Right. Okay.
So, who was there to observe creation before creation?
Well, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But then, going back to what we were saying about imagination, you can go back prior to creation, can't you? You can use your imagination to go anywhere you want. So you can go back prior to creation. All you got to do is get onto this thing, which we call our imagination, and go there. Now, what's there? Well, use your imagination. It'll tell you.
What's there is whatever you want to have be there.
Exactly that.
Now, just real quick, was there any kind of last-minute thoughts you want to share before we run out of time? We're not quite there yet, but I know they'll start that music on me suddenly.
Yeah, sure. I just want to say to people, look, I really recommend my book to you. Go onto Amazon, buy The God Secrets. It's not an easy read. It's not like reading a novel. It's good work. But then, if the whole concept of God and what it means is important, then it's worth spending a little bit of time and understanding where this idea came from, what it's done to us, what it means to us. Royce and I have had this discussion before. Most of the wars and the killings in this world come from belief in some form of God or religion. People fighting one another. Even today around the world, people are killing one another in the name of religion. Really, we've got to get to the heart of this. And if it's a hoax, if there is no such thing as this, then we really do need to get to the bottom of it.
And I also want to remind everybody that Revolution Radio no longer has the old Revolution Radio YouTube page. It's now Talk Revolution Radio. They said they had some difficulty with the other page over at YouTube, so they created a whole entire new one. So just put in Talk Revolution Radio, and you'll go to the new channel. I want to thank everybody for attending. I show we still got about another 5 minutes to fill in here, however.
All right, okay.
All right. So I don't know why I'm thanking everybody quite this early.
All right. Okay.
But I want to remind everybody also that to come see me this coming Saturday at my site, www.talknowradio. And let me scroll up here and I'll tell you who the guest is going to be. It's going to be Maureen Dawn Healy. We're going to talk about energetic keys to Indigo Kids. And again, that will not be airing here at Revolution Radio. That one's going to be at my site. Would love to have you guys present in the chat room. And then next Wednesday, it's going to be Andrea Matthews Inhabiting the Heavens Now. And then finally, next Thursday, we'll be back here, Mike Horn, talking about the Enoch prophecies. And like you said before, religion has caused an awful lot of problems. Maybe it's time people did like you do and went back to the beginning of religion and see what exactly, how it got its root, how it's got started. A lot of people are even totally unaware of the fact that monotheism was a latecomer, something like about during the days of Moses, which is how far after the flood, not to mention before the flood. Why wasn't God present before then? Why did it take them some 2,000 or 3,000 years just to find out God existed, in other words?
Sure. I mean, I can leave you with a couple of thoughts, which is interesting. Moses means son. That's what Moses means in Egyptian. Now, all the pharaohs before and after Moses had the title Moses. Ahmose, Tutmos, Ramesses, all of these were included the word Moses. Ramesses means son of God, son of Ra. Tutmosis means son of God, son of Tut, one of the major gods in the Egyptian pantheon. Ahmose means son of God. So this whole thing, Moses, was the word son, son of God. Now, you can see, can't you, that this guy Moses was called Moses because they thought that he was God. There is a strong circumstantial evidence to believe that Moses was, in fact, Akhenaten, who was a deposed pharaoh and was therefore thought to be God on earth, Son of God, God. Now, understand, therefore, that anything Moses did or said was thought to be done and said by God. The word of God was the word of the Pharaoh. Anything the Pharaoh said was the word of God. It wasn't the word of the God, some mythical God in the sky. It was the word of some guy who was claiming to be God. Understand that Moses, you read the book of Genesis and understand what happened. Moses, anybody who didn't agree with him, anybody on the Exodus who didn't agree with him, he killed them. What came out of the Exodus was those people agreeing with Moses, or were prepared to say that they agreed with Moses, so they didn't get slaughtered.
Yeah, and you know what you're describing about the Pharaoh speaking as God sounded an awful lot like popery, didn't it?
Well, it certainly was. I don't think any of the popes have ever claimed to be God, but the pharaohs did. The pharaohs were the continuation of Osiris on earth and were thought to be God. God on earth.
The popes, they claim to be the vicar to God, which is, it's so close to being the God that
it's close, yeah. It's close, I agree.
You might as well, connect the dot there.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's close, yeah, sure.
But, in principle, though, it's very similar to popery, at least very similar, I think.
Sure.
So, for all we know, popery may have been around and called Pharaohism in the beginning.
Could be. They all had funny costumes.
All righty, everybody. It's going to bring to the end our show, which I show they should start the music just any time now. I want to thank everyone for coming. I couldn't have a show without you. I want to thank you for bearing with me when my guests left earlier in the first half of the show, and I just kind of babbled to fill in time. I need to get something prepared for the future in case such an emergency occurs. It's been a pleasure being your host once again. I look forward to seeing y'all next Thursday, and naturally I look forward to seeing y'all at my site in the future if y'all decide to join. And don't forget, when we recommend people's books, these are the views coming from a third party, the authors who's on the show. Revolution Radio has no part of that per se. With that, y'all have a good weekend, and we'll talk to you next Thursday. Thank you very much.
Listening to Revolution Radio. Revolution Radio.
You don't see it, do you? How close we are to absolute chaos? The sick ones are sitting on their fat asses, eating and drink themselves into a stupor, polluting the world without a second thought while it goes down the toilet. Nobody wants to do the nasty work. The shit that we all just think about. Most good citizens are just along for the ride and then bitch and moan and complain about everything when it doesn't work out. Not me. Get it done.
Revolution Radio, where we do the nasty work. www.freedomslips.com